I thought I'd found the perfect suburban neighborhood when I moved into Willow Creek Estates. The houses were beautiful, the lawns were pristine, and the community seemed peaceful. What I didn't realize was that peace came at a price, enforced by not one, but 4 Karens who ruled the HOA board like it was their personal fiefdom. Karen D., the president, was a real estate agent who treated every conversation like a high-stakes negotiation. Karen M., the vice president, was a retired schoolteacher who never stopped lecturing. Karen S., the treasurer, ran a boutique downtown and believed aesthetic perfection was a moral imperative. And Karen B., the secretary, was a paralegal who loved citing obscure rules more than she loved her own children. Together, they were unstoppable. Separately, they were merely irritating. But when they combined their powers at monthly HOA meetings, they became something far more terrifying. Before we go further into this unbelievable story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. Trust me, you're going to want to follow along for what happens next because this revenge is absolutely legendary. My troubles began 3 weeks after I moved in. I'd planted a small vegetable garden in my backyard, nothing fancy, just some tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. I came home from work one day to find a citation taped to my front door. Apparently, vegetable gardens were only permitted in the northeast corner of properties, and mine was in the southeast corner. The fine was $200. I called Karen D. to explain it was an honest mistake. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize there were specific coordinates for vegetables. I'll move it this weekend." Her response was ice cold. "The rules exist for a reason. The fine stands. You have 14 days to relocate the garden or face additional penalties." Fine. I moved the garden. Then Karen M. drove by during my lunch break and saw me working from home on my patio. 2 days later, another citation. Home businesses required special permits, even if no clients ever visited the property. Another $300. I explained I was just answering emails. The visual presence of work materials visible from the street creates an impression of commercial activity, Karen M. informed me primly. Perception matters in maintaining property values. I started keeping my laptop inside. Then Karen S. noticed that my house numbers, which were bronze, didn't match the brushed nickel finish that had apparently become mandatory in a recent HOA update I'd never received. $400 fine, plus I had to purchase new numbers from her boutique at a 70% markup. When I installed those numbers, Karen B. cited me for doing home improvements without submitting the proper request for architectural modification form in triplicate, even though I was literally just screwing in house numbers to fix a problem they'd created. Another $200. I tried attending an HOA meeting to address this insanity. The 4 Karens sat at the head table like judges at a tribunal. I calmly presented my case, explaining that the constant citations for minor issues seemed excessive. "I'm happy to follow the rules," I said reasonably. "But perhaps we could have a warning system for new residents who aren't familiar with every regulation." Karen D. smiled with all the warmth of a loan shark. "Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Our community standards are clearly documented." In a 300-page binder, I pointed out, that was never provided to me. Available upon request, Karen B. chirped, not looking up from her laptop where she was undoubtedly documenting everything I said to use against me later. Karen M. leaned forward. "Your attitude suggests you don't value what we've built here. This community's perfection doesn't maintain itself." Karen S. nodded. "Some people simply aren't HOA material." That's when I realized rational discussion was pointless. These 4 had created a little kingdom where they were the absolute monarchs, and they had no intention of being reasonable. They fed off the power, the control, the ability to make people jump through hoops for their amusement. So I stopped arguing. I paid the fines. I followed every ridiculous rule. And I started making phone calls. You see, what the 4 Karens didn't know about me was that before I semi-retired to this suburban paradise, I'd been a corporate attorney specializing in property law and zoning regulations. I'd also done very well for myself, well enough that I could afford to fund my hobbies, which now included amateur urban planning and creative problem solving. I spent 3 weeks researching everything about Willow Creek Estates. The HOA had been established in 1998 when the developer built the community. But here's the interesting part: the original development plan had included a parcel of land that was never built on, a 2-acre lot right at the main entrance to the neighborhood. It was owned by the developer's holding company, which had gone bankrupt in 2008. The land had bounced between bank ownership and tax liens ever since. It was currently owned by the county, available for purchase to resolve back taxes. The total cost? $78,000. Pocket change for what I had in mind. But I didn't just buy the land. That would be too simple. First, I reviewed every single HOA rule, all 300 pages that Karen B had been so smug about. And I found something beautiful. The HOA rules were incredibly specific about what homeowners could do with their properties, but this parcel wasn't technically part of the HOA. It was adjacent to the community, at the entrance, but the original developer had never included it in the HOA boundaries, probably planning to build something commercial there eventually. I confirmed this with 3 different property attorneys. The land was subject to county zoning, not HOA regulations. And county zoning for that parcel was listed as mixed-use commercial residential. I bought the property in cash through an LLC. Then I started making more calls. Meanwhile, the 4 Karens continued their reign of terror. They cited Mr. Hendricks, the elderly man on the corner, for having a lawn ornament that exceeded the permitted height by 3 inches. They fined the Johnsons because their teenage son's car was parked on the street overnight, even though he'd had a flat tire. They threatened to put a lien on the Martinez property because their fence was colonial white instead of Dover white, a difference invisible to the human eye. At the next HOA meeting, Karen D announced with great satisfaction that compliance was up 15%. "Our standards make this community desirable," she declared. The other 3 Karens nodded like bobblehead dolls. That's when I made my move. I submitted my plans to the county for approval. Mixed-use commercial residential development. All properly documented, all completely legal. What I was building, you ask? A self-storage facility. But not just any storage facility. This would be a state-of-the-art, 3-story climate-controlled storage complex with a bright orange and purple exterior, because those were the colors of my favorite sports team and county regulations had no restrictions on commercial building colors. The design included large floodlights for 24-hour security that would be visible from space, and conveniently, also illuminate the first 3 streets of Willow Creek Estates. But wait, there's more. The facility would have truck access for customers, with large moving trucks rumbling past the entrance at all hours. The county approved a loading zone right at the corner where Karen D's house had a perfect view. I added security features, including a speaker system that would announce, for safety purposes, whenever a truck was entering or exiting. Every hour of operation. Which would be 24/7. Oh, and because it was mixed use, I was including a residential unit for an on-site manager. I'd already hired my cousin Ricky, who had a completely legal but aesthetically unfortunate hobby of collecting vintage cars in various states of repair. County code said he could park up to 6 personal vehicles on the property. They'd be visible from the street. All perfectly legal. The county approved everything in 6 weeks. I'd made sure every single detail met or exceeded code requirements. I'd even gotten letters of support from the County Planning Commission for bringing business development to the area. Construction began on a Tuesday morning. The 4 Karens noticed the activity immediately. By Tuesday afternoon, I had 4 separate phone calls demanding to know what was happening. "Oh," I said cheerfully to Karen D, "I'm developing that empty lot at the entrance." "Exciting, right?" "You can't do that. The HOA has to approve any construction. Actually, the property isn't part of the HOA. I had 3 attorneys verify it. But thank you for your concern." Karen M called next, her voice shaking with rage. "This is unacceptable. You're ruining the neighborhood character. I'm providing a valuable service to the community. People always need storage. Plus, the county was thrilled about the tax revenue. Karen S. tried a different approach. We can negotiate. Perhaps a different design, something more aesthetically pleasing? Oh, I love the design. Orange and purple really pop, don't you think? Plus, it matches county requirements perfectly. Karen B. went straight to threats. We'll sue you. For what? I've broken no laws. In fact, I have documentation proving every aspect of this project meets or exceeds county requirements. As a paralegal, I'm sure you appreciate proper documentation. The emergency HOA meeting they called was spectacular. All four Karens sat at their table, but their kingdom was crumbling. Homeowners were furious, but not at me, at them. Because everyone realized that if the HOA board had been less focused on harassing residents over paint colors and garden coordinates, they might have noticed a 2-acre commercial parcel at their front door and done something about it years ago. This is your fault. Mr. Hendricks shouted at Karen D. You were too busy measuring my gnome to pay attention to actual threats to our property values. Mrs. Johnson stood up. You fined us thousands of dollars for nonsense, but you couldn't be bothered to secure the entrance to our neighborhood? The meeting dissolved into chaos. The four Karens tried to maintain control, but their power was evaporating. They'd built their authority on the perception of protecting the community, and that perception was shattered. But I wasn't done. Not quite. You see, I'd also filed a complaint with the county about discriminatory enforcement of HOA rules. I'd documented every fine, every citation, every ridiculous penalty they'd issued. I'd interviewed neighbors. I'd built a case showing a pattern of selective enforcement and harassment. The county was now investigating whether the HOA board had violated fair housing regulations and state HOA governance laws. Additionally, several homeowners, emboldened by the chaos, were now filing small claim suits to recover fines they believed were unjustly levied. Karen B's paralegal credentials meant nothing in the face of angry homeowners with legitimate grievances and actual attorneys. But the real masterstroke? I'd also purchased the naming rights to the storage facility entrance. The large sign, visible from every house on the first 3 streets, would read, Willow Creek Premium Storage, Karen-free since 2025. The county approved it. Technically, Karen was my middle name. I had the birth certificate to prove it. Construction continued. The foundation was poured. The frame went up. The orange and purple exterior started taking shape. And every day, it became more real, more permanent, more impossible to ignore. I was at the construction site when I saw all 4 of them approaching. Karen D., Karen M., Karen S., and Karen B., walking together like they were heading to battle. Their faces were masks of fury and disbelief. They stopped at the property line, staring at the structure rising before them. The massive sign was being installed, letters 10 feet tall, Willow Creek Premium Storage, Karen-free since 2025. I walked over to the fence line, hard hat in hand, and gave them my warmest smile. Karen D's face had gone completely white. You've destroyed everything. No, I said calmly. I built something. There's a difference. Karen M. was shaking. This is vindictive. Cruel. This is business. And it's completely legal. I believe someone once told me that the rules exist for a reason. Karen S. looked at the orange and purple building like it was personally offensive to her soul. We could have worked together. We could have been reasonable. You had that chance. Multiple chances. You chose citations and fines and petty power trips instead. Karen B., ever the paralegal, tried one last play. There has to be a violation somewhere. Some code you've broken. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared for this exact moment. 3 county inspections, all passed. Building permits, all approved. Zoning compliance, verified by the Planning Commission. Environmental impact study, completed. Traffic study, submitted. I even got a letter of appreciation from the county commissioner for my contribution to local business development. Would you like copies? The four of them stood there, watching their reflection in the orange and purple panels of the storage facility. The building that would greet them every time they came home. The floodlights that would illuminate their houses. The trucks that would rumble past at all hours. The cheerful announcements from the security system. The vintage cars in various states of repair. All perfectly legal. All completely permanent. All because they couldn't resist making my life miserable over a vegetable garden in the wrong corner of my yard. Karen D's legs seemed to give out slightly. She grabbed Karen M's arm for support. Karen S had tears streaming down her face. Karen B just kept shaking her head, mumbling about ordinances and regulations, as if she could find some magic rule that would undo what I'd done. But there was no rule. No regulation. No citation they could issue. I'd beaten them at their own game, using the same system they'd weaponized against everyone else. The only difference was that I'd done my homework, I'd followed every rule, and I had the resources to do it properly. The moment of recognition hit all four of them simultaneously. You could see it in their eyes. The understanding that their little kingdom was finished. That every time they drove home, they'd see that orange and purple building. That every resident would remember it was their obsessive pettiness that had allowed this to happen. That their power, their control, their reign of terror over paint swatches and garden coordinates had led directly to this. Karen D looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she had nothing to say. No smug negotiation tactics. No threats. Just the dawning horror of someone who'd finally realized they'd pushed the wrong person too far. And if you enjoyed this epic tale of HOA revenge, make sure you show this video some love with a like and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more unbelievable stories of entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.